How many times have you heard it that if you have that much money to go towards your rental, might as well buy a house? For example, a person would rent a 2-bedroom apartment for about 5,500 per month in Gaborone, which excludes utilities and other amenities. Upon hearing this, those around that person would advise that they buy a house instead and put that money towards monthly mortgage repayments. On the contrary, however, others would argue that it is actually more expensive to buy and own property than it is to rent. Maybe the best solution to the previous example would be to look for more affordable houses for rent, which in itself is very subjective. This then becomes a conundrum: to rent or to buy. Obviously, in cases of duality, there are advantages and disadvantages to either option. In the end, however, purchasing a home or renting are both big decisions, whether it's purchasing to build equity and provide a nest egg for the future, or renting to have low maintenance and the flexibility to move. We recognize the complexity of making either decision, so our sit down tonight will be getting to the crux of what considerations are there to make for those interested in either buying or renting homes. Our conversation will be led by Managing Director of Tlou Real Estate, Dudley Malapisi.
There's a lot of things we need to consider before either buying or renting property. How are your finances looking? First of all, why are you thinking of either buying or renting a property? Did you just recently relocate to a new city and you're thinking, should I buy, should I rent? I mean, most financial advisors will say you shouldn't spend more than 30% of your income on rent. And if you're planning on buying, how's your debt to income ratio? Can you really afford to take a mortgage? Because you know this, you can qualify for a mortgage, it doesn't mean you can afford a home. Are you prepared to part with money for maintenance and all the bills that come with buying a house, or are you better off just renting for the meantime?
I know this question might seem a bit similar to my last, but what do you think makes a person a suitable or prime candidate for either buying or renting a home?
I think the biggest factor is finances, financial goals. And where do you see yourself in the next 5 years financially? I mean, if you're planning on buying a house, then you need to look at your debt to income ratio. Sometimes you might want to cut down on some of your debts, save up for a down payment for a house. So give yourself some time, rent in the meantime, with the financial goal of eventually owning a home. Because banks have a criteria for financing, certain banks will finance a certain percentage of the value of the property, looking at the location, the neighborhoods and stuff. So, for example, if a bank is offering you 80% of the total value of the property, you'd need to come up with 20% of that. So essentially that's what a down payment is. Sometimes banks will offer you 100% financing, and because of your financial goals, you'd still want to put down something to knock down the monthly installments. Sometimes they'll offer you up to 105% to cover for your conveyancing, legal, and all the other fees involved in property purchasing.
When it comes to buying a home, when is the right time to do so? This is in regards to how the economy can affect the property market. So maybe you could give your answer paying attention to that.
Best time to buy property is yesterday. The second best time is today. Fine, we look at stuff like inflation. Inflation affects the property markets. Right now in Botswana, our inflation is quite high. And to mitigate that, the government has increased interest rates just a few weeks back. And that affects the property prices. That affects your financing. The cost of borrowing becomes higher. But because Botswana is a quite stable economy, we don't see our property, the market being too volatile. It's quite stable. So I'd say the best time to buy property is every day, as long as it meets your financial needs.
Dudley, what are some of the key factors that people who find themselves in a financial bind after buying property usually overlook before the fact?
Engaging professionals. That's one key thing that we need to educate Botswana on. You need, just as much as before you buy stock, you go to a stockbroker and they explain to you everything, what are stocks, how do they move, and they choose the stock for you depending on your financial goals. We need to start doing that with property also. Meeting property agents, financial advisors, discussing your financial goals. Since the increment of interest rates a few weeks back, a lot of people are going to be shocked when their banks take a little more than they usually take for their mortgages, and a lot of people wouldn't know why. And that's because someone took a variable rate mortgage. They didn't understand why they're taking a variable rate mortgage, the implications of that. And can you imagine right now in a case where inflation is high, cost of living has generally increased in the past few months because of COVID-19, and someone may have been hanging just by the thread, and this could be the tipping factor, having to pay more for their mortgage.
In closing, Dudley, as a real estate enthusiast, what would you say is better? Is it renting or buying?
Some people want to own a property because they want the ego factor. They want to be able to say, I own the house that I live in. And some people don't see themselves living in the same place for more than a year, and they're always traveling around, so they prefer renting over buying.
This program was brought to you in association with First National Bank of Botswana.
FNB, how can we help you?